Let's talk to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, who's got many things to say. We're going to ask him about Ukraine and about the Middle East ceasefire as well. Chris, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Nice to talk to you. What do you make so far of what's happening in Lebanon? It turns out that Joe Biden announced this morning or yesterday, late yesterday, that from 4 a.m. this morning local time, Hezbollah and Israel appear to have found some form of ceasefire. I've spoken to a former assistant to Benjamin Netanyahu who said, you know, he's not sure this is the answer, but it looks promising, doesn't it?
Well, I'm not sure who wins here. What we've done is managed to go back to 2006 when the last round of fighting ended in an agreement by Hezbollah that they would remain north of the Litani River, which is about 18 miles north of the Israeli border. Right. That's effectively what we've got now. Hezbollah is still intact. It's still got its huge number of rockets and missiles, which they can fire from distance. I think the key litmus test, Mike, is whether the 80,000 Israelis who had to evacuate the north of Israel can go back and live in peace, to tell you the truth.
Yes, and as of now, apparently, they're not quite ready to do that because they're not sure that they can trust that this particular peace deal will hold. And as I say, the guy that I spoke to said, look, you know, you can't really trust Hezbollah. We have to see what the Lebanese army does, the Lebanese government does, to see whether, you know, we can completely deconstruct Hezbollah out of the mainstream kind of network of what is government in Lebanon.
Yes, funnily enough, looking at what the Lebanese people are saying right now is they want to get rid of Hezbollah. Yeah. There's been such a shock to the Hezbollah system, particularly as you remember with all those pages going on. Yeah. That their social networks have been totally disrupted. All the sort of initiatives they have for getting inside the population and being able to provide service to them have been dislocated. So it's bought Israel peace for a while, I think, but I have to say that we're setting it up for another round if the Lebanese army can't cope in that narrow strip between the Mediterranean, the Litani River and Syria.
Right. I mean, funnily enough, while I was talking to my contact over there in Israel, it turns out that Hamas say that they are now ready for a ceasefire in Gaza as well, which I presume you would also take with a similar pinch of salt, perhaps.
Oh, absolutely. And we know from experience that these organisations, when they're really down at heel, they'll surrender, they'll have a ceasefire, but they'll come back again later. Unless you finish the job, you're going to find that you're fighting the same battle in the next generation.
Yeah, exactly right. Let's talk a bit about Ukraine and what's going on there. We've got John Healey, the Defence Secretary, yesterday being asked about Storm Shadow missiles being used in Russia.
Well, it holds for this committee as well. I won't be drawn on the operational details of the conflict. It risks both operational security, and in the end, the only one that benefits from such a public debate is President Putin.
So he's not really willing to talk about it in Parliament, which I suppose we understand. There is a sort of an uptick, if you like, I suppose, in Ukraine's military power now because of these missiles.
I think they're tactically useful. They're able to dislocate the Russian logistics and support networks. They're also able to drive Russian aircraft back from their airfields that are close to Ukraine. But I don't think it's a real game changer. It would have been about 6 months ago to have ATACMS and Storm Shadows in the order of battle. Right now, it's helping the Ukrainians stem a serious tide of Russian advances along a broad front. We've seen the Russians take back about 1,200 square kilometers of the Ukrainian salient in Kursk. And all along the front line from Kherson to Donetsk, we're seeing quite significant Russian tactical advances. So it's stemming the tide more than actually winning the war for Ukraine.
Right. I mean, what we're not seeing, though, I suppose, is anything out of the ordinary from Russia in terms of a retaliation for the firing of these missiles into Russia.
Well, we had that demonstration of what they said was a new ballistic missile that was fired on Dnipro.
Yes.
That's part of a general sort of assault on that particular oblast of Dnipro-Petrovsk. But they're also saying, look, if we can put this missile, which either has a nuclear or conventional head, on top of Dnieper, we can put it on top of any European capital. So there's a lot of shadow boxing in regard to that, and huffing and puffing, as I said, from the Russian leadership.
Yes, and so in terms of the cyber kind of threats that they've been making noises about as well, and we've seen, you know, lots of incidents over the past few days of what could be suspicious activity. Who knows whether it's any suspect packages or, you know, tampering with various different technological systems. Would you expect that to kind of increase from the Russian side?
Yeah, it's a good point, Mike. I think there's going to be a lot of what we call horizontal escalation. You and I have discussed for most of this year that I think the end of this year would see probably peace talks. The Russian economy is going to bomb next year, and I think ordinary Russian people are going to see the effects of that. We're already seeing quite a lot of bankruptcies and rationalizations amongst their major firms. And Union Pay, which is the Chinese-Russian equivalent of SWIFT, is not accepting Russian credits at the moment. So that's a key sign. With inflation going up, and also about a third of the GDP being spent on defense at the moment. If the oil prices drop, then Russia can't continue this campaign at the current pace. So I think it's all coming together. The fact that President Trump will be in the White House in January, I think we're going to see serious peace talks in Ukraine. But the threat to Ukraine will remain. It's just like for Israel. You know, if Russia freezes the conflict along the current borders, they still say they want Odessa and Mykolaiv in the west, and they still want to cut off Ukraine from the Black Sea. I'm afraid to say we'll have another frozen conflict. NATO will have to step up, I think, and say, look, we're giving certain guarantees to Ukraine. You certainly can't join NATO right now while you're in dispute with Russia.
Interesting. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, thank you very much indeed, former NATO commander there, giving us his view on what's happening both in Ukraine and, of course, in the Middle East, where a ceasefire is currently holding between Lebanon and Israel, but we'll see how that goes. We're only into it for a few hours so far.